How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm loving the backdrop.
Oh, yeah, it's a bit messy, but it's like that.
It it's just nice and chilled, which I like. So that's good. It's a great film. Really enjoyed
Thank you.
watching it, and thank you for taking part in this today. Really appreciate it.
No problem.
Excellent. So I won't waste any time, and I'm just going to roll.
All right, let's do it.
Oh, okay. Can you tell me about what drew you to starring in the film?
Well, yeah, sure. What drew me was first my relationship with the director, with Charles Officer. I met Charles at the Toronto Film Festival in 1998 when I was there with my film Slam, my first film, Slam. And so we were both, young artists, filmmakers, black, who were like, yo. And he was living in Toronto, and he became one of my like Toronto buddies. So anytime I was there, I was kicking it with him and what are you working on? And and it was also always an interesting connection for me because it's it's not it, I didn't have a lot of friends that were directors. I have friends that are musicians, what have you, but he's a director. So it was always interesting for me to communicate with him about what was going on because it was the other side of the camera, you know? And so over the years, we always stayed in contact. If he was anywhere near where I was or vice versa, we saw each other, we broke bread, building on what we were doing and what have you. And so, he's someone that I count as a friend and someone that I really like, that I think is a charming and sincere, thoughtful person, and whose work always reflects that, you know. So I'm familiar with his previous work, and his work has always reflected his character. So and he told me back then, like, yo, I'm gonna write something for us to do together. And you hear that and you're like, yeah, okay, yeah, okay. Um, but when the script finally came through, I was first off excited for him, because he had, found the project, the funding, the whole nine, and it's really gonna happen. And then excited that he had followed through on his word. But I guess you could say it's expected of him if you know him, because that he is the type of person that follows through on his word, but that he came back and said, okay, it's been 15 or 20 years, but that project I said we were going to do, this is it. And so I was excited to read it. I was committed to it before I even read it, though, because it was Charles, So I came to it as you come to something with a friend, but to my surprise, I was also very moved by the writing and by the story, and was honored to be asked, to participate.
Oh, that sounds amazing. It's really great when somebody has, good character. It's
Yeah,
very important.
it is.
Um, would you say that the central story of the film is about a father and son relationship, whether that's kind of biological or not?
Um, yeah, I think it's exactly that. You know, um, Many sides of that, right? Because on one hand, you have Akila, who is very much has made a decision that he will not become his father, right? Um, and then he's put in a position of kind of challenging himself to the question of, well, what kind of father would you be to a young person who you see needs your input, needs your help, you know? Which he could have easily dismissed. But instead he decided to reluctantly step into the picture, you know? And and so yeah, it's very much about that. And I think it's a pertinent question, um, especially because I, for one, acknowledge that there is a crisis within the prevailing idea of masculinity. And that needs to be approached internally as well, like that men need to challenge themselves beyond, these notions of what is strength, what is hard, what is cool, what is gangster, what is all of this shit. And there's definitely a lot of people would say toxicity, but I'm trying to avoid the word. There's definitely a lot of men who are responding very defensively to that, and in doing so perpetuating these patriarchal stereotypes that don't allow any questioning, that don't allow themselves to be challenged or to look at themselves and to realize the importance of adapting, the importance of vulnerability, the importance of shifting, how they see themselves in the world, and of shifting the sort of privilege with which they walk through it. So, and these are things that, especially when we talk about the father-son relationship, if the father hasn't done the work, how can we expect the son? Right? And of course, when you think of, the LGBTQIA community and what have you, we know that oftentimes also sons have to push the fathers to do the work, to accept them as themselves, and to push them beyond the sort of, short-sighted perspectives that are held and maintained through every aspect of society, be it religion, be it education, be it societal programming or systemic, relationships to any industry or what have you. Yeah, I mean, I believe that this idea of patriarchy has to be dismantled, actually, and so yes, the father-son relationship has to be challenged. What does that mean? What does, So I think that the character that Charles created within the context of a crime thriller is subtly interesting.
I would agree. How did you prepare for the How did you prepare for the role of a killer?
Reading and thinking, a little bit of exercising. I mean, and the barest, and a lot of music. Usually if I'm preparing for something, maybe the first thing that I'll do, aside from reading the script 100 times, is start concocting a playlist. Music that either I think belongs to the character's world. Yeah, music that I think belongs to the character's world, or that might inspire a world. So there's that. There's physical training involved as well, to kind of get out of the lackadaisical Saulness of myself, so pushing myself to step out of myself some, and that can be done through like physical training and what have you, and buff out a little bit, what else? And yeah, then there's a great deal of reading and thinking involved, conversations with Charles, but it's sort of it's the marination process that's crucial. You season it, but then you gotta let it sit, so yeah.
Kind of like the jerk chicken, right?
Very much like the jerk chicken.
Okay, so the music really stood out for me. So did your music background and upbringing inform your creative expression as an actor?
Yeah, I mean, it's it definitely did. Um, because when you listen, music has so much character within it, you know? Um, and and sometimes it's a hill that you have to climb in order to, like, you listen to a James Brown song that's like, girl, let me tell you. And you're like, how the hell, where does that energy come from? That, I just woke up. Like, girl, let me like so there there is some sort of things to figure out in terms of how to arrive at certain places in music, right? And the music that I grew up with, between the church and hip hop, and then the music that I began choosing as I got exposed to the choices in music, right? And got into jazz and blues and reggae and stuff that, just going deeper, 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 deeper. Um, yeah, I think it definitely informs my character as an artist. And I think the more experience you have as an individual, as a person, all of that informs your positioning as an actor, right? The more that you live through, because that's really what the acting thing is that, you think of something like a breakup, once you, like, it's one thing to be a kid being like, I will never blah 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 blah. When you live through an actual breakup, when you live through, whether being cheated on or cheating, when you live through parenting, when you live through childbirth, there's things that, getting robbed, getting jumped, any of these things, having a gun held to your face, when you live through these things, um as an actor, I've always taken note, like, I remember when my dad died, for example, and the insurmountable grief that I felt. And I also remember a moment within that grief going, so this is that. Which is kind of like a bookmark that I left for any acting thing that was gonna, so because you can try your best to imagine what it's like the types of roles that you're given as a teenager playing in a Shakespeare play, and you're Mark Antony, but you have never lived through no war. You haven't seen your best friend killed. You have, but as time progresses, you begin to really appreciate the emotional journey. And so music is a part of that emotional journey. So yes, music has influenced um my relationship to acting, but so has living.
What was it like working on the soundtrack and kind of reconnecting with Massive Attack?
Well, the fact is that when Charles approached me as an actor for this project, um I was already in the process of working on a project with Robert. Yeah. So we had been working, Robert and I, and I was very excited about some of the stuff we were coming up with. And at some point, Charles was like, well, what are you working on right now? And I told him. He was like, what? Can I hear something? and, and so when I shared some of the music, of course, Charles was like, do you think there's any chance? And so Robert was kind enough to allow it, and it's true that it made a lot of sense because of the sort of, sonic ambience of Massive Attack, the relationship to dub, and roots culture and the whole nine. I think that it made the perfect, connection between Charles, who's an actual, like, huge fan of theirs anyway. So we were able to, like, fulfill his dream. When he got to meet Robert, he was like, oh my God, Saul, he was out of his mind. Um, and but I do think that it was a smart decision on his part, and that it makes a lot of sense for the film, because the sort of ambience and textures that they work with really brings the necessary balance to the equation of the image and the story. And so the rest of my work on the score was a little bit difficult, just because I was, trying to connect music to picture, but I'm in the picture. And normally, like, after I perform, I'm not necessarily trying to see myself at that point in the process. I can work see the finished product, but I'm not trying to see the process of editing and all that. If I'm acting in something, I'm trusting the director. But as the composer of the score, I had to be a bit more involved after we shot the film. And so that was a little difficult. But there was some magicality involved in that. It things kind of just fell into place.
I love when that happens.
Yeah.
How important was the representation of Jamaican culture and diaspora in the film for you personally?
Well, for me, I thought it was super exciting, primarily because, like all of us, like we grow up yearning to see shit, like yearning to see ourselves reflected. My family's from Haiti, but I grew up in New York, so I grew up embedded in, West Indian culture. And it's true that these narratives are not necessarily central to what we see projected, in cinema and what have you. And then also for someone like Charles, who is avoiding the sort of miserablest, sort of outlook, and who is finding a creative way to raise real questions and what have you, to be engaging himself in that direction. I thought it felt deeply personal. And me, I was very proud to be asked to participate in something that felt that personal and connected to the historical context of the film, which of course, was already familiar with and what have you, but it was a interesting way to dive a bit deeper into that. Yeah, it was I found that to be one of the most exciting aspects of it, and because also the playlist I was able to put together was very fun. Oftentimes I'm looking for excuses to go a particular direction in what I'm listening to. And so this film allowed me to spend a year listening to exactly what I wanted to hear,
I know. Okay. There was an interesting range of female characters in the film. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah. Well, I think that corresponds with this question of what Charles is approaching in his storytelling and the sort of people that he wants to portray, right? When I think of that there's the Greek, right? And the sort of power that she has. There's Donisha and what she carries and fights and aims to protect. I think that obviously from a male perspective, that it's an honest attempt to give to shed some balanced light on society as we experience it, because I mean, the strength that we know in our communities and in our lives is often not projected, once again, and that's primarily because of who's behind the camera and who's writing the script and the fact that they're now raising these questions and don't realize that we see their gaze, we see where their camera is angled and what it's focused on, and the stories they want to project in the whole nine. And it's disheartening, and so I think that Charles makes an honest engagement there in terms of the women in the film, and what he's working in terms of story, even though he is working at a kind of slow crawl dismantling of the sort of patriarchal influence there, like Aquila, all these, and then of course it's, you think of the role that Aquila's mother plays, and yeah, there has to be shifts, and of course we have to shift away from it. This is, you think of the idea of like the man as protector and all that, and but this is someone that is unable to protect, right? And so you think of future projections, and like I've heard Charles say, like, how do we break these generational cycles, but also how do we break these cycles of the relationships that we hold dear, and also the relationships that we have to ourselves, our loved ones, and what we hold dear in society and why, and whether that serves us or not. Yeah, I think he does an interesting job.
Yeah, I agree. In relation to that, would you say that the film is about redemption or breaking the cycle? Which one would you say it more closely relates to?
Interesting. I guess it's about breaking the cycle. That's what I would say. More so than redemption. I think the redemption is interior, and we don't necessarily get to experience what we want to in those regards. We don't exactly make it to the redemption.
Okay.
Yeah.
And finally, what's next for you?
Well, after this, the film that I co-directed with my wife, Neptune Frost, will be released theatrically in the UK, starting on November 4th. And so that's the next thing that the UK will get from me is a science fiction musical that we directed in Rwanda with a completely Rwandan and Burundian cast and crew. And it's a musical, so I did the music and co-directed it with Anisia Uziman, who also was the cinematographer. And so yeah, that's what's next.
Okay, that sounds amazing. I love a good sci-fi and I love musicals, so that's even better. Okay, well, thank you so much. I've so enjoyed speaking to you, and I've learned quite a bit. So that's fantastic. So yeah,
Nice talking to
thank you.
All right, thank you. Ciao.
Okay, thank you so much, Louisa.